Let me say this slowly. Not everyone who drains you deserves access to you. Smart people don't fight toxic people. They outgrow them. And that changes everything. Now, listen closely. I've learned this the hard way, and I want you to hear it in your bones. Toxic behavior is not a personality flaw you need to tolerate. It's a boundary problem you need to solve. Smart people understand something most of us were never taught. You don't heal by explaining yourself to someone who enjoys misunderstanding you. Here's what smart people do first. They see clearly. They stop romanticizing disrespect. They stop calling manipulation, love, control, concern, and cruelty honesty. They name it, because when you name something, it loses its power to confuse you. Smart people don't ask, why are they like this? They ask, why am I still available for this? And that question is uncomfortable. It shakes your identity because it forces you to confront the truths. Staying connected to toxic people often comes from a deep fear of being disliked, fear of conflict, fear of being alone. But smart people choose self-respect over approval. They don't engage in emotional wrestling matches. They don't chase closure from someone who thrives on chaos. They understand that clarity is closure. And here's the most powerful shift. They stop trying to be understood by people who are committed to misunderstanding them. That's not strength. That's self-betrayal. Smart people begin with this rule: if it costs me my peace, it's too expensive. This isn't cruelty. This is courage. Let me be honest with you. Smart people don't confront toxic people the way movies tell us to. They don't deliver dramatic speeches. They don't demand apologies. They don't wait for accountability from someone who has never taken responsibility in their life. Why? Because smart people understand one brutal truth. Toxic people don't change through confrontation. They change targets. So instead of explaining smart people observe, they notice patterns, not promises. They listen to behavior, not words. They understand that consistency is the only real apology that exists. Here's what this looks like in real life. A toxic person provokes, criticizes, dismisses, or subtly shames you, and the old version of you feels the urge to defend, justify, prove, over-explain. But the smarter version of you pauses, breathes, steps back emotionally, because engagement is oxygen, and smart people do not feed fires they didn't start. They respond with calm, not coldness, with distance, not drama. They choose neutrality, and neutrality is terrifying to someone who survives on control. Short answers, clear limits, no emotional leakage. This is where power shifts. Smart people don't say, you hurt me. They say, this doesn't work for me. Notice the difference. One invites debate, the other ends it, and let me tell you something important. You don't need to convince someone that they are toxic in order to protect yourself from them. You don't need their agreement to exit a harmful dynamic. This is not avoidance. This is emotional intelligence. Smart people protect their energy the way they protect their time, ruthlessly and without apology. They know peace is not passive. Peace is a decision. And once you stop reacting, the game changes, because toxic people can't control someone who refuses to be controlled. Here's where it gets even deeper. Smart people don't try to heal toxic people. And that realization can break your heart if you're the kind of person who sees potential everywhere. Let me say this gently but firmly. Your empathy is not a rehabilitation center. Smart people understand that compassion without boundaries is self-destruction. They stop confusing being kind with being available for harm. They recognize that some people don't want healing. They want access. Access to your time, your attention, your emotional labor. And smart people refuse to pay that price. They know this truth. You cannot love someone into emotional maturity. You cannot explain someone into accountability. And you cannot sacrifice yourself into being respected. So they detach, not with anger, but with clarity. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what isn't yours. Smart people stop personalizing cruelty. They stop asking, what did I do wrong, and start asking, why am I accepting behavior that hurts me? That shift is everything. They also understand something most people miss. Toxic people feel threatened by boundaries because boundaries expose their lack of control. So when you change, they will accuse you of changing. When you grow, they will call you cold. When you protect yourself, they will call you selfish. And smart people let them. They don't rush to correct the narrative. They don't chase their reputation in the mouths of people who never spoke kindly about them anyway. They trust that character doesn't need defending, consistency does the talking. This is where real strength lies. Not in fixing, not in saving, but in choosing yourself, even when it hurts, because the smartest thing you can do with toxic people is stop trying to make them better and start making yourself safer. This is the part no one prepares you for. Smart people expect backlash when they set boundaries, and they don't mistake backlash for failure. Let me say it clearly. When you stop being easy to manipulate, you will be labeled difficult. That's not a sign you're doing something wrong. That's a sign the old rules no longer work. Smart people don't argue with the backlash. They don't over-explain their boundaries. They don't soften them to make others comfortable. Because a boundary that needs constant justification is not a boundary, it's a negotiation. And smart people don't negotiate with people who disrespect them. Here's what they do instead. They stay consistent. Calm tone, same limit. Repeated as many times as necessary. No emotional spikes. No guilt-driven explanations. Just quiet firmness, because consistency is louder than confrontation. They understand that toxic people test boundaries the way toddlers test limits, not because they don't understand, but because they want to see if you'll fold. Smart people don't fold. They also release the fantasy that everyone will understand their decision. Understanding is not a requirement for respect. You don't need consensus to protect your peace, and when guilt shows up, and it will, smart people recognize it for what it is, a withdrawal symptom. You are detoxing from people pleasing, from over-functioning, from carrying relationships alone. That discomfort doesn't mean you're cruel. It means you're healing. Smart people don't aim to be liked. They aim to be aligned with their values, aligned with their nervous system, aligned with the life they are trying to build. And here's the quiet power move. They let silence do the work. No defending, no chasing, no proving. Because people who truly respect, you don't punish you for having limits. Here's a truth that stings before it sets you free. Smart people don't try to win with toxic people. They walk away from games that are designed to exhaust them. Because toxic dynamics are not about truth. They're about control. Smart people recognize the pattern: shifting goalposts, circular arguments, selective memory, emotional baiting. And once they see it, they stop participating. Not because they're weak, but because they're wise. They understand this. You cannot reason with someone who benefits from chaos. So they stop chasing fairness. They stop demanding reciprocity from people who only know how to take. They stop hoping this time will be different. Hope without evidence is a trap. Instead, smart people focus on self-regulation. They learn to notice when their body tenses, when their chest tightens, when their mind starts racing after an interaction. And they trust those signals. Your nervous system is not dramatic. It's diagnostic. If someone consistently leaves you feeling smaller, confused, or drained, smart people don't minimize that experience. They honor it. They also stop giving second, third, and chances to behavior that has already shown its intention. Forgiveness doesn't mean access. Healing doesn't mean reconciliation. And here's the hardest part. Smart people accept that walking away doesn't make them the villain, even if someone tells that story. They let others rewrite history if that's what it takes to exit with their dignity intact. Because staying in a toxic relationship to avoid being misunderstood is a slow form of self-abandonment. Smart people don't stay where they have to shrink to survive. They choose peace over proving, clarity over chaos, freedom over familiarity, and that choice, quiet, firm, unapologetic, is how they win. This is where emotional maturity shows itself. Smart people master their reactions, not because they don't feel deeply, but because they refuse to let toxic people control their inner world. Let me tell you something powerful. The moment you stop reacting, you reclaim your power. Toxic people are often skilled at pushing emotional buttons they installed themselves. They provoke. They criticize. They twist your words. And the old version of you takes the bait, defending, explaining, spiraling. Smart people pause. They breathe through the urge to react. They choose response over impulse because reactions are predictable and predictability is exploitable. So they become emotionally unreadable. Calm voice, minimal words, no visible agitation, not cold, not cruel, just grounded. This isn't manipulation, it's self-protection. They understand that not every feeling needs to be shared with someone who has proven they can't hold it safely. Privacy becomes sacred. Silence becomes a boundary. Smart people also stop oversharing their dreams, plans, and vulnerabilities with people who use information as ammunition. They learn that trust is built on behavior, not history or proximity. And here's the shift that changes everything. They stop taking things personally that were never about them. Toxic behavior is often rooted in insecurity, shame, unhealed wounds. Understanding that gives context, but not permission. Smart people don't internalize someone else's dysfunction. They choose emotional sobriety. They ask, what is mine to carry? And what isn't? And then they put down what was never theirs. This level of self-control isn't suppression, it's sovereignty. When you regulate yourself, you become ungovernable to chaos. And once toxic people realize they can't get a reaction from you, they lose interest or escalate. Either way, the truth becomes clear. Here's the shift that separates smart people from everyone else. They stop expecting closure from toxic people because closure doesn't come from someone else's apology. It comes from your own decision to stop reopening the wound. Smart people realize that waiting for closure keeps you emotionally tethered to the very person you're trying to heal from. It hands them power over your peace. So they choose internal closure. They stop rehearsing conversations that will never happen. They stop imagining the perfect moment where the other person finally understands. They accept the hardest truth. Some people will never see you clearly because it would require them to see themselves honestly. And that's not your burden. Smart people grieve, not just the person, but the version of the relationship they hoped for. They allow sadness without self-blame. They let disappointment pass through instead of setting up residence. They also rewrite the story they tell themselves. Instead of, why wasn't I enough, they say, why did I stay where I wasn't respected? That question doesn't shame you. It empowers you. This is where self-trust is rebuilt. They stop seeking validation from people who invalidate their reality. They stop needing agreement to move forward. They accept that some chapters end without explanation. And here's the quiet courage. They forgive without reconnecting. Forgiveness becomes an internal release, not an invitation, because healing is not about restoring access. It's about restoring yourself. Smart people understand that peace is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It arrives slowly in moments where you realize you're no longer triggered by someone who once consumed your thoughts. That's freedom. This is where smart people make a life-altering move. They redesign their environment. Because healing doesn't happen in the same spaces that harmed you. Smart people understand that boundaries are not just conversations, they are structures. Who has access to you? How often? In what capacity? Under what conditions? They stop giving front row seats to people who heckle their growth. They curate their inner circle with intention. Fewer people. Safer people. People who can sit with discomfort without weaponizing it. People who listen to understand, not to respond. And here's the hard truth. Distance is sometimes the most loving choice. Not just for you, but for everyone involved, because proximity without respect breeds resentment. Smart people also protect their routines, their mornings, their sleep, their mental bandwidth. They understand that toxic people don't just drain emotions. They drain focus, creativity, and hope. So they design days that support regulation, not reactivity. They fill the space toxic people once occupied with things that restore them. Movement, silence, purpose, learning, meaningful work, not as distraction, but as reclamation. They also stop explaining their new life to people who don't have access to it. Growth becomes quiet, joy becomes private, because not everyone deserves a backstage pass to your becoming. This isn't isolation, it's alignment. Smart people choose environments that reflect the person they are becoming, not the person they had to be to survive. And something powerful happens when you do this. Your standards rise naturally. What you once tolerated now feels unthinkable. That's not arrogance. That's evolution. Here's the truth that seals everything. Smart people turn pain into wisdom, not bitterness. They don't deny what happened. They don't minimize the damage. But they refuse to let toxic people write the final chapter of their emotional life. Instead, they extract the lesson. They ask powerful questions. What did this teach me about my boundaries, about my patterns, about what I will never tolerate again? And then they live the answers. Smart people stop repeating the same dynamic with different faces. They recognize familiar red flags faster, charm without accountability, intensity without safety, words without follow through. And here's the shift. They trust themselves again. They stop doubting their instincts. They stop gaslighting their own experiences. They honor their inner voice, even when it whispers instead of screams. They also release resentment, not for the sake of the other person, but because resentment keeps you emotionally tied to what hurt you. Letting go becomes an act of self-loyalty. Smart people don't become hardened, they become discerned. Open, but not naive. Kind, but not available for harm. Loving, but rooted in self-respect. And when they meet new people, they don't lead with explanation. They lead with observation. They let trust unfold slowly, earned through consistency. Because wisdom says this, anyone can be charming in the beginning. Character reveals itself over time. Smart people don't rush intimacy. They don't force connection. They allow alignment to develop naturally. And that's how the cycle ends, not with anger, but with awareness. Let me leave you this. Smart people don't defeat toxic people. They outgrow them. They don't seek revenge. They don't wait for apologies. They don't need the last word. Because the last word is a life well lived. Smart people understand that walking away is not weakness. It is self-respect in motion. It is choosing peace over performance. It is choosing dignity over drama. They stop asking, how do I make them understand me? And start asking, how do I honor myself? And that single question rewires everything. They learn that boundaries are not walls meant to punish others. They are bridges back to themselves. Every limit they set is a declaration, I matter. My well-being matters. Smart people accept this truth without apology. Not everyone is meant to come with you. Some people are chapters, not the whole story. Some lessons arrive disguised as loss. And when the guilt fades, when the noise quiets, when the chaos no longer lives rent-free in your mind, you realize something profound. You are lighter, clearer, stronger. Not because they changed, but because you did. So if you're standing at the edge of a hard decision, hear this clearly. Choosing yourself will cost you some people, but it will give you your life back. And that is how smart people treat toxic people.